very pleased to be on this panel with what I call the YGBs, and that is Young, Gifted, and British Virgin Islanders. These are the top talents that the BVI government has to offer, and they're the two chief advisors for the BVI within the government. The financial secretary, who's responsible for the Ministry of Finance, and Mr. Brodrick Penn, who is also responsible for the Premier's ministry and all the portfolio that falls within them. So I'm just going to let them briefly mention the portfolio that comes under their purview, or their remit.
Good afternoon, everyone. This morning I was bragging about how hard Premier Smith to work. And when you hear the combination of what I do and what FS does, you'll understand why. Under my ministry in the Premier's office, we're responsible for tourism, immigration, economic planning, trade and development, communications, town planning. I don't even remember all they are, but it's about 8 of them. And some aspects of financial services, certainly BVI finance and financial services promotion.
FS?
Yes, my role as financial secretary, well, I guess the first one is the budget, fiscal advice, which encompasses some economics, taxation, which is a big part of what I do now, whether it's taxation at home or taxation abroad. Border control and customs is one of the things that we look at in the Ministry of Finance as well. In addition, we're also responsible for the IT in the government of the Virgin Islands, post offices and stuff like that. So, yeah, revenue, well, taxation, we look at through the Inland Revenue Department. So it's fairly wide. Sometimes it could get technical, but it's exciting. And if we have one minister, or I should say 2 ministers in the person of one person supervising us.
Okay. So I'm pleased to be around the YGBs here on this stage. Our topic today is regulatory focus, the global transparency agenda. Are we keeping up? And incidentally, just about 4 days ago, there was an article that came out from Transparency International, and it concluded, among other things it listed, but the conclusion was, meanwhile, aside from a drop in company and corporations, it looks like business as usual in the British Virgin Islands. Is it business as usual in the BVI?
Elise, no, it's not business as usual. Many of the efforts that the BVI exerts today in recent times has had a lot to do with keeping up with the regulatory changes overseas, and especially we believe that one of the things that the government of Virgin Islands needs to do is to ensure that it protects the industry. And to protect the industry means that you need to ensure that you're keeping up with international regulatory standards and that we maintain the level of compliance in the BVI with all of these things at a high level. We also believe that the reputation of the Virgin Islands has a lot to do with the fact that the regulator and the government of the Virgin Islands has had a fairly strict regime of ensuring that we maintain all the highest standards. And that is the main trust of ensuring that the BVI industry, financial services industry, I should say, is always relevant and sought after. It makes no sense, absolutely, to have a regime, a regulatory regime where the standards are not very high, because then there's no confidence. And so we have to make sure that everyone abroad and at home can have confidence that any BVI structure that you use is well regulated and that will stand to the test of time and scrutiny. And so we rely heavily on the rule of law at home, and we rely very heavily on ensuring that we comply with all the international standards that we have to in the industry that we pay attention to.
Brodrick, you spent 16 years as a regulator. I think I'm correct. About 16 years as a regulator. And I know Mr. McTavius, who's head of the Financial Services Commission, one of his mantras was reputation, reputation, reputation. How has all of that is happening in the global arena affected the reputation of the British Virgin Islands?
That's a very good question, Elise, because it's easy to, there would be an inclination to try to downplay the extent to which the BVI's reputation has been affected. But the fact of the matter is, it has, in my view, been materially affected. Over the past 2 years or so, there's obviously been a raft of accusations against BVI, against our clients, against you, the service providers. And I think just a proliferation of stories within the media and otherwise have affected our reputation negatively. But having said that, on the flip side, it has galvanized us into action, particularly to try to mount a robust defense within the media, to get back into the rooms with our clients and explain what we are doing, and also to develop a regulatory regime into something more improved than it was prior to some of these accusations. So while we've been materially affected negatively, particularly from a perception perspective, I think we've responded very well in trying to either develop our regime or to clarify the position, as Neil explained, in terms of how well regulated we are and how we are moving to even greater heights in terms of regulation.
One of the things that the BVI government has done, and it's under your portfolio, is establish the International Tax Authority, which wasn't there when a lot of these initiatives started. Can you tell us about the ITA and what happens on the ITA in terms of the international obligations?
The ITA began with an increased obligation in the Virgin Islands to comply with tax information exchange commitments. We recognized that it was a full-time job, and also that there were some subtleties in the request that was sent to us that demanded specific attention and detailed attention, in addition to following up with the industry to get this information back. As we've progressed along, we've recognized that we need, I guess for the lack of a better word, specialists that will be able to scan the horizon and participate in the progression of international tax regulation and standards. And so the ITA have taken up that role. In the ITA now we have individuals that spend all their time, whether sitting in review meetings, helping in the review of standards and development of standards in international cooperation. And so I would say that they're responsible now, they're at the tip of the spear of international cooperation in the global arena. There are things like the FATF. We don't do the FATF side, we do the taxation side. And the BVI sits in a number of places. We sit on the steering committee of the Global Forum for Information Exchange. We sit in the peer review group, and we also a member of the automatic exchange group, which is actually developing the detailed standards for CRS and future automatic exchange standards. So that is part of what we do. We try to ensure that the BVI is always in the conversation. so that we don't find ourselves in a place where things are just happening and we don't know what's happening. The BVI, I think, right now is positioned in a place to understand where the standards should be developing towards. And I think that's very important if you're going to continue to have products and a regulatory standard in the BVI that complies with what the international standards, not only what they are now, but what they develop into the future.
Can you go into details about our tax information regime? I know we signed on to the OECD Global Standard for Transparency and Information Exchange in 2002, and the first tax information exchange agreement we had was with the United States. Can you tell us more about the tax information regime?
Well, generally speaking, the tax information regime, if you want to describe it that way, basically sets some standards on confidentiality, timing, quality of information that should occur whenever a partner requests information on tax from you. So for example, if we have a request from the United States, for example, there are certain standards that they need to meet in asking us for this information. There are certain things that we need to look at. There are some time constraints that we have to meet in order to, in meeting the requirements to provide them with this information. And there's some confidentiality standards that we need to maintain while we provide this information. So that is, it helps in two ways. Number one, it protects the industry because we don't take information and send it all over the place in an unconfidential manner. And also it provides the partner, the requesting jurisdiction, with the confidence that the information that they're getting is correct. And they get it in a timely manner. And we have to report against that in the global forum itself, and we graded on it. And those are the things that come together to give you a grade. In the BVI case, we have a rating of largely compliant in the global forum arena. So it helps with determining legitimacy. We believe as well that if you're transparent, it goes a long way in demonstrating that you're not, for the lack of a better term, what people call us or try to call us. They try to call us a tax haven, but how could you be a tax haven if you're transparent? If when you need information, you can get it. So we spend a lot of time because we believe that being transparent is fundamental to being legitimate, or having legitimate business, being able to facilitate legitimate business. Because then it would be difficult for someone with, for lack of a better term, less than honorable intentions wouldn't be using a BVI company, because they know that if law enforcement or a tax corporate, a tax administration needs to find you because of something illegal that you've done, they'll be able to find you. But there's also the confidence in the industry that that information is safe, and that we'll not go to a position where we allow people to look at that information without a legitimate purpose or wanted to have it. And that is the fundamental reason why when the United Kingdom requests from us, first of all, a public registry, that was a definite no. And at another stage, we're requesting that we have a registry of beneficial ownership that they could access. We can't allow that, because we have to be able to reassure the industry that we are doing everything in our power to protect their confidentialities, right? So that is where we go. So we're transparent, but we're confidential. Because it's important. We believe that confidentiality is a basic human right, at least in the BVI. If you don't want the public to know this information, they should not know it. It's your decision whether the public should know your information or not. And we will gather and continue to gather very zealously. However, if we have a situation where someone is laundering money, or someone is financing terrorism, we do have the mechanisms, very robust mechanisms for pursuing, finding and pursuing those individuals. So we need to do that because if we continue to go down the road of trying to make sure that our structures are well regulated, then you can feel confident as an industry that you can use a BVI structure because you would know that someone else, you might be a legitimate businessman, but someone else you could be reassured that they're probably a legitimate businessman themselves because it's very difficult for them to use it for the wrong thing. So that's very important to us, Elise.
Yes, thank you so much for that. And I'll come back to you on the specifics. But Brodrick, I wanted to ask you more in terms of the overall BVI strategy and the outlook. The remit of promotion and marketing falls under your remit. So what is the BVI's overall position and strategy in terms of adhering to these demands that are emanating in the global arena? And if you can mention some of the demands.
Yeah. Well, I think for BVI, we've always wanted to see ourselves as a balanced jurisdiction. I think that's a word that I would use when it comes to describe BVI, and that is balance. Because while we recognize that there are international standards that we have to meet and that we do meet, we recognize, at least from the marketing perspective, from the commercial side, that there is a balance that we have to meet with ensuring that our clients or service providers are able to operate their businesses successfully. Now, those things don't need to be at odds, in my view, when it comes to information exchange, when it comes to sharing information, whether it's for tax purposes or for regulatory or other criminal purposes. I think the industry should want to be able to allow us to share that information where there's evidence of criminality and so on and so forth. But I think we got very zealously the point that we must be able to balance what we need to do from a regulatory perspective with achieving our objectives, your objectives, from a commercial perspective. And I think you see that reflected in the way we go about developing our regime. FS alluded to the point of the United Kingdom asking us, pushing us really, to get to the point of a public central registry. In consultation with the industry, we recognize that that's not the best thing for the industry. And we put a foot down on it very, very strongly. And from a marketing perspective, I would say, and from a negotiation perspective, we ensured that we demonstrated that the system that we have in place, where we use the service providers to facilitate the holding of beneficial ownership information, the verification, etc. We use those arguments with the United Kingdom to say, well, we hear where you want to go. We don't believe that that system will work for us and it will solve our purpose. So I think that's a clear demonstration of the fact that we recognize what the world is trying to achieve. We comply with the global standards, but at the end of the day, we do what we think is in the best interest of our industry.
So essentially what you're saying is that you disagree with Transparency International, that you cannot have transparency and at the same time maintain some level of confidentiality and privacy. Is it a false dichotomy?
No, I think the BVI demonstrates every day that you can be transparent and still be confidential. Transparency International don't necessarily have the same goals that we do. Our goal is to continue to be a facilitator for international cross-border business. And we're going to do that in a way that is legitimate. We're going to do it in a way that discourages and hopefully eliminates criminality in that arena, in that space, that environment. And I think that the BVI is time tested in demonstrating that it's possible to operate in that space. So I quite strongly disagree with them. But like I said, their goals are perhaps a bit different to ours.
Okay, and delving further into that question, one of the things that happened after the most recent leaks is that we had a discussion here in Hong Kong with the service providers, and one of them said that for the first time they were getting a request from their clients, please do not put my information on any electronic platform. Can you keep it in a file locked in a cabinet? Would a file locked in a cabinet work with the systems that you have now established or now establishing to comply with international standards?
You wanna?
Yeah, let me start on the macro level, Neil, and I'm sure you're going to get down to the system that you're building. I think one of the things that our clients and the service provider has to recognize is that the world is changing. And while I stand by my comments that we have to do what's in the best interest of our clients and of the BVI, we need the industry to appreciate that we're moving along a spectrum, and if we don't move at the right pace along that spectrum, the powers that can make decisions that might be significantly deleterious for our business model. So in my view, and we talked a little bit earlier when the bank demonstrated where it's going in terms of technology. In my view, we have to get on beyond the file that's locked in a closet. The reason why we have to do that is that there's a lot of pressure on jurisdictions like the BVI to be able to share information. The fact of the matter is not all of our clients are squeaky clean. Some of them get through the door because of lapse practices. Some of them get through the door because they're downright criminals and very good criminals. So we must appreciate that where those type of clients show up on our book of business, and there are legitimate, legal, lawful investigations of criminality and other wrongdoing, that the BVI must be in a position to be able to share information. So it really boils down to be able to get the information to law enforcement and other officials on a timely basis. If it's locked in some special file cabinet here in Hong Kong, and there's tremendous pressure on law enforcement or regulators in the BVI to get information, and we fail that test, then that's really it. So we need to be moving along a spectrum where we now take that information and translate it into a different medium where we're able to have access to it. And the truth of the matter is that has been our saving grace with our arguments or discussions with the United Kingdom. When we put down our foot to say, no, we're not going to a public register, they effectively said, okay, well, we hear you. You sound like you're being reasonable, but we expect that you will have an equivalent system. And in order to be able to demonstrate that we have a equivalent system, or I should say a system that is similarly effective, we have to be able to share the information timely. We have to be able to have access to it. You have to be able to have access to it from your third-party clients, etc. And so we've moved beyond, in my view, that locked file cabinet to something more in the modern age that's based on technology, and that should be able to get us the information within a short period of 24 to 48 hours. And I think the FS could elaborate a little bit more on where we're going with that.
Yes, and I think the industry here might be very interested in what we're doing. But before I go on, I'd like to say this, that one of the things that we recognize about leadership is that you see things that others don't see. What the BVI sees is that we will need to use digitize technology in order to be relevant and valuable to you, the industry, in the future. And we believe in order for us to remain competitive, that we should be the first movers. It's a basic principle which the Bank of Asia is built on, and that is just, we hope, we intend to be just the tip of the iceberg. So I think you can be reassured that we will be moving quickly ahead. And as an industry, you will be very well placed to utilize BVI services. What we have now, in order to exchange this information in a quickly manner, beneficial ownership information, is something that we call BOSS, standing for Beneficial Ownership Secure Search System. It is a virtual platform. It is encrypted using ISO 12001 standards for security protocols. We have used the most secure system we can find, of secure protocols, which we are thinking about having it in a physical space. We are thinking about being able to stay from one location and search all the CSP's servers, albeit in a partitioned manner. And we are thinking about having this information in an encrypted form in a decentralized cloud. We've decided to have encrypted decentralized cloud that one competent authority will have access to. And when I say in encrypted form, the information that we have, the beneficial ownership information that we intend to keep, will be stored in an encrypted way. In order for the competent authorities to get access to that information, they're going to have to use some encryption keys, at least 2, to get at it. And it's only at that particular search is when it's decrypted. So if someone, for some really unlikely way was to ever get access to that information, it would be they would find it in an encrypted sense, which they won't be able to make sense of. So we don't believe, for the same reason that countries with nuclear deterrence have the nuclear submarines all over the place. We don't think it makes sense, or is it safe to have that information in one place. But we will be able to search it in a decentralized setting that is based in the cloud itself. And that we should be able to get information within a matter of seconds if a request is sent in. So the ITA, for example, wouldn't be the competent authority that would have access to that. It'll probably be the Financial Investigation Agency. So if we get a request from a requesting party outside the outside of the BVI, what we will have to do is relay that request to the Financial Investigation Agency, and they will give it to us. So within the BVI itself, there'll be one competent authority that has access to that system, and within that competent authority, there'll be one person and an alternate, most likely, who will be able to search that system. You won't be able to access that information off-site. So the capability to actually use BOSS will be restricted to a particular terminal and a particular location.
Secret location.
Well, I guess people might know where it is, but it wouldn't make any sense knowing where it is, because you won't be able to do anything with it. There are several stages. The individual is authorized. First of all, has to be authorized to utilize it. And then in order to get to the system itself, they have a two-stage authentication process to sign on. So they have a password that I think changes on a regular basis. And this when they enter that password, then a password has to be sent, another password has to be sent to them for them to actually get access to that system. And then there are restrictions on how long they can use it. So if they're idle, I mean, we are telling them for less than a minute, it logs them off, and they have to go through the same authentication process again. So, you know, there are two main principles that we have for running this system. Number one, and the most important for us, is security. There's an entire team with a vendor that is dealing with the crypto technology that surrounds the security of the system. On the other side, the other point that is important to us is the accuracy of the information itself. And there's where we need to ensure that the industry is populating that information with current and accurate data. But you know, as I was in a meeting last week with a focus group from the industry in the BVI, and most of our conversations, Elise, was around the security protocols and the manner in which they would populate their data. One other thing is that, yes, the industry, a particular company service provider will be able to access their information as they can do now. But nobody else will be able to access it besides the competent authority under particular circumstances.
Yeah, I think, sorry, Elise, Neil gave a lot of technical details of the system, the specific platform that he's developing. I just wanted to go back and add a little bit of context to remind the service providers in the room that you'd recall that earlier this year, we amended our laws to make sure that beneficial ownership information is held onshore in the BVI. So that's a starting point. The law now requires that beneficial ownership information is held onshore, held in the BVI. The reason for that is to be able to have access to the information quickly and to be able to exchange it quickly. In order to be able to facilitate that, we obviously have to create a system, and here is where the platform coming, where there's some very specific pieces of information under the law that is going to be required to be held in relation to the beneficial ownership of companies, and the platform will facilitate the holding of that information and the passing on of that information.
You say held. Is it held or is it accessible?
Held is a general term, but accessible is a practical term.
Okay.
Because the technology is going to allow it to be interlinked. So a service provider in Hong Kong that has an affiliate service provider in the BVI, as long as that BVI service provider has immediate access to the information through its Hong Kong channels or through its Hong Kong intermediaries, then that will satisfy the test.
Okay. I know we are running short on time, so I'm sure that there are pressing questions, so we'll take those now. Okay, well, I think all your, okay. Greg?
The timetable that we have, the system will be operational by the end of this year, but we have until June to populate it. So we're going to have it walk-in and tested very early to see if there's any things there that we might need to enhance. But it'll take a little more time to actually populate the data. And like I said, most of the efforts that we have now at this stage in the game is just making sure that the security protocols are extremely stringent.
Because we're running out of time, I'll just say thank you very much, Brodrick Penn, our Permanent Secretary in Premier's Office, and thank you very much, Neil Smith, Financial Secretary for the Ministry of Finance. Thank you.